Hi, welcome to this lecture. Our main focus now is on modifying the appearance of legends of plots when we have aesthetics that are mapped to variables. Let us first create these simple scatter plots. So I'm going to use this simple scatter plot for demonstration purposes. And then we're also going to use point. Now, let's say we specify the aesthetics to be displacement, then it's miles per gallon. Now, what we want to do is we want to map the color of these points to a variable cylinder. That categorical variable is what we want to use to color these points. So now we come in here inside aesthetic function, then you specify color, then we have to convert this categorical variable to be a vector. And if you run this here is a scatter plot that we created using this code. Now, what you are seeing here is that with ggplot, we already have this legend. So we want to see how can we try to modify this legend. Okay, now let us start. In order to change the default colors in the legend, we will use values argument. So on that argument, we will supply a character of vectors of the specific colors that we want. Now, let's come in here and say scale. Now, in order to change color, we have to specify color. Then we specify manual. Okay, so in this case, we want to change the color. So we have to specify manual. Okay, now let us pass in a vector in this argument of values. So the vector that we're going to pass in here will change the default colors that we find in the legend. So let's say, for example, we want red, then let's say blue, then let's say green. So if we run this, what you are seeing here now is we have been able to modify these colors, and we now have red, blue, and green. So that is how you can try to modify the colors. So now, what about the title? As you can see, the title or the name in this legend simply just takes whatever that we have passed in to be vector of this number of cylinders. So now, how can we change the name? So in order to do that, we will use the name argument. So now we're going to come in here, and what we want to do is we want to specify this argument name, and we're going to say cylinders. And if you run this, you observe we have managed to change the name in this legend. So this becomes helpful, especially if the user is not familiar with the underlying data. Okay, so now they can be able to even try to make sense out of this data by changing or by understanding the name here in this legend. Now, let us assume that we want to modify our data in order to display only the relationship between miles per gallon as well as the displacement of all the cars. But in this case, we are only interested into looking at the cars with at least 6 cylinders. So what do I mean by that? I mean we're only interested in the number of cylinders 6 and 8. So how can we do that? In order to do that, we will have to modify the argument that we have been looking at, which is limit. So if we come in here and you say limit, and then we pass in this vector, say we want 6 and 8. So now let's try to run this. Now what you're seeing here is that ggplot is giving us a warning. So this indicates that the data that is related to 4 cylinders has been dropped. Okay, now if you come here and you observe here you observe this legend. So what you are seeing in this case, we now have the number of cylinders being 6 and 8. We can also go ahead and modify the labels in the legend. So in that case, we have to use the labels argument. Okay, now let's say we come in here. I'm going to remove this limit. Okay, and I come in here and say labels, and then in this case I pass in this vector. I say I want 4, then it's 6, then it's 8. Okay, so if you run this, you can see here we've managed to change the labels inside this legend. So that is how you can change the labels to your own desired label. And when you try to add labels into your legend, that will also ensure that whatever graphic or whatever plot that you have is even more easier for people you are presenting to understand this graphic or these plots. When there are large number of levels in the mapped variable, you may not want the labels in the legend to represent all of them. So in that case, that is where we make use of breaks arguments. Okay, so we use breaks argument and then specify the labels that you want to use. Say for example, we come in this case, and now I'm going to add breaks. Okay, and then I'm going to pass in only these 2 number of cylinders. And if I run this, you observe here that these arguments now only represents the 2 levels, which is 4 and 8 of the mapped variable. So that is how you can also try to modify that in order to only represent 4 and 8. As you can see here, that the numbers in the legend now represent 4 number of cylinders as well as 8 number of cylinders.